Renowned pastor and author Barbara Brown Taylor shares a story of what happened to her one Sunday after she was leaving church. She was walking out the doors of the church, a service that she had just preached at, an experience of worship that touched her heart. And as she was walking down the steps, she saw to her left this thin, disheveled man. He looked like a lost soul. He was looking up at the steeple and the cross on top of the steeple, and he was pointing to it. And then as she was trying to kind of slip by him, he looked her in the eyes and pointed to the church doors and says, "What do you believe in there?" And as she fumbled around inside for some words to articulate before she could get them out, he says, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bother you," and he walked away. And Taylor was haunted by that encounter. And she thought to herself, how could I not have at least said a sentence or two about what I believe? It's almost impossible to overstate the importance of the words that Cheryl just read for us today, this encounter between Jesus and this fisherman named Simon. I think it's fair to say that we wouldn't be here today had that moment not happened. It's fair to say that human history would be radically altered. It's fair to say that millions of lives would have turned out differently had Peter and Jesus not had this encounter. Paul Tillich, the great 20th century theologian, says, this moment is the moment Christianity began. Think about that. Not the birth of Jesus, not the cross on Golgotha, not the empty tomb, not Mary Magdalene's encounter with the gardener who turns out to be the risen Christ, not Mary Magdalene's first sermon about the resurrection to the stunned disciples. None of that was the beginning. Tillich argues this moment right here is when it all began. When Jesus looks at his disciples, who he's been journeying with for a number of years now, and he says, "Who do you say that I am?" And this timid fisherman speaks up and says, "You are the Messiah, the Christ, the Son of the living God." This morning, we continue our sermon series called Rooted Deeply in Christ as we are reflecting collectively on what does it mean to be Christian today? What does it mean to be Christian in what some are calling a post-Christian world? What does it mean to be Christian in what many call a secular nation? What does it mean to be Christian in a pluralistic neighborhood and community? And I have two questions for us to ponder today. The first is, imagine if Jesus were to show up right now and look you, each of you, in the eye and say, "Who do you say I am?" And what if on the way out today you saw a thin, disheveled man, a lost soul, and that person looked you in the eye and says, "What do you believe in there?" What words would you speak? But before we go there, I just want to lift out two important things from the text today. The first is that the author of the Gospel of Matthew wants us to know that this encounter happens in Caesarea Philippi. Now, why is that important? Well, first of all, it's a major port city. It is a place of political and economic power. Things happen here. It'd be like having this conversation on Wall Street. And what is Caesarea Philippi, or who is it named after? Caesar Augustus and his son Philippi. So this city has the stamp of Roman approval, which is an oppressive stamp. Because if you are a citizen of Rome, then you must say and confess and proclaim that Caesar is Lord, the Son of God. So for this fisherman, Simon, to say Christ is Lord, you are the Son of God, is a political statement. He risks his death by speaking those words Now, many of us we get anxious when we hear the word political in a church service. But let me just clarify something. As the church, if we're not political, then we ought to all go home. Being political does not mean being partisan, and our culture has confused these two things. Being Christian means our belief system, our way of life, influences and impacts everything else that happens outside these walls, in our culture, in our communities and neighborhoods. And if it doesn't, it's not worth being part of. So the Gospel of Matthew wants us to know, the author does, that this is a political statement that Peter is saying. Secondly, after Peter answers correctly, look at what Jesus says. He says, "Blessed are you, Simon, son of Jonah," which is his former name. He's about to rename him. "Blessed are you, for flesh and blood has not revealed this to you, but my Father in heaven." What he's saying is that you have not reasoned your way to this conclusion. This is a gift of grace. Your ability to see this and say this publicly is a movement of grace in your life. And so it is in our walk with Jesus. Our mind, reason can lead us to conclude that he is a great prophet, he is a great moral teacher, he is a great wisdom sage. But reason can only get us that far. Grace has to carry us over the threshold, to be able to confess and proclaim he is Christ, the Son of the living God. There's a difference between reason and revelation. Now, this shouldn't be that unfamiliar to us. If you have been to the Grand Canyon, as I was many years ago, you know that the experience gazing upon that canyon is different than any photograph that you could ever receive, any story anybody could ever tell you. Those of you that have held a newborn child know that nothing can prepare you for that moment when you're gazing into that child's eyes and that child is gazing back into your eyes. Anybody who's ever fallen in love knows what it's like to be undone by this other person, to be slayed in a way in which you know you'll never be the same again. Anybody who's ever dove deep into the ocean off a Caribbean island understands that there are colors that you can see there that no one could ever prepare for you for, and no picture could ever capture. It's the same with the grace of God. Without an experience of that grace, without being slayed by the Spirit, without being undone by the love, the radical love of God that meets you in your place of vulnerability, you will never be able to confess he's Christ, the Son of the living God. We need reason, yes, but we're also dependent upon revelation, and the community carries the revelation for us when we can't go there yet. And that's okay. So the two questions: who do you say that I am? And what is it that you believe in there? So let's take the first one. Who do you say that I am? Now, when I lead small groups, those of you that come on Tuesdays, you know that I'll often say this, but I believe it, and I ask all of our leaders to live this out, is that I don't ask people to do something I'm not willing to do myself. Even the stewardship campaign, Nicole and I are investing in this mission and ministry. That's why I can get out in front and call you to do the same. Leaders must practice what it is that they preach and what it is that they proclaim. So let me begin. If Jesus were to show up for me right now and say, "Mark, who do you say I am?" This is my best attempt at age 48. Living as I do in suburban Allendale, pastoring a suburban church in Ridgewood, New Jersey that reaches into Bergen and Passaic County in the northeast of America, this is what I would say. I would say, Jesus, you're the Christ. You are the depth dimension of all reality, the depth dimension of all that I can see in creation, all that I can't see. You are the depth dimension of every living, breathing thing, every living human being. You are the human face of the divine love that is the deepest reality. It is a reality that shaped this universe from the beginning. It is something that sustains every living breath and heartbeat, and it is at work in ways that we can't always see and often can't, restoring things to their original goodness. I would say, Jesus, you are the way and the truth and the life. And when I have lost my way, and when I have found myself in a situation where I don't know how to respond to the judgment coming at me, or the evil, or the violence coming at me, or the suffering that I'm living with, I look to you and I watch the way that you acted and the things that you said, and I try to follow in your footsteps and respond the way that you would have me respond, Jesus. I believe you are the truth. When I forget who God is and I get lost in my ideas and opinions and I think God is this way or that, I look to you and you show me who God is every time. And you know what, Jesus, when I forget who I am and I start to believe my press, my critics, or those who praise me, I look to you and I remember, yes, that's who I am at my best. At my core, thank you for holding up a mirror and helping me see who I most eternally are. And you know, Jesus, when I get inundated with all kinds of advertisement and all these things that promise to give me a great life and make me happy and make me feel blessed, you know what? When I get lost in the confusion of all of that, I look to you and it's real simple. That's what the meaning and purpose of my life is. And you help me see the truth about real life, about what will truly make me come alive with gratitude and joy, and what will enable me to be a blessing to other people. How would you answer Jesus' question? Who do you say I am? Ken Wilber, author and philosopher, says there's 4 main purposes to religion, and they're all important. He says religion helps us clean up, it helps us grow up, it helps us wake up, and it helps us show up. So use that as a frame to understand what it is that you might say if Jesus were to show up for you. How does Jesus help you clean up the mess that you have made of your life? And you have made a mess. We've all done it. How does he help you clean up things? And how does Jesus help you put on your big boy pants when you say I do to another person and you commit yourself through joy and struggle, through health and sickness, to be there for her? And how does God help you put your big girl pants on when you are called to be mother and to raise this whiny, smelly little thing up to become a healthy, happy adult? And how does coming here, how does your belief in Jesus help you to be more mature and more human? And how does Jesus help you wake up from your slumber, from your forgetfulness? How does he help you to see what's hidden in plain sight, what you missed again? And how does Jesus help you show up again and again and again to your most frustrating neighbor or your most obnoxious boss? How does Jesus help you show up and be present to your rebellious teenager or your stubborn spouse? How does Jesus help you clean up? How does he help you grow up? How does he help you wake up? How does he help you show up? And what is it that you believe in here? What is it that you do? Why is it that you come here at all? We are in the midst of a major change. The church is changing. It will change. I don't even know what it's going to look like on the other end. And some days I think it's sad, and some days I think, hallelujah, because the church has to change. Something's dying, and I preached about this summer. We are in the middle of a great reformation. And we are going to see this evolve over generations. This is not going to happen in my lifetime. It's not going to happen in yours. Something fundamentally is shifting. And we're in the middle of it right now. There's a sea change. I mean, just look back on your own childhood. I look back 40 years, and I think about my peer group. Everybody was involved in the church. They may not have gone to my church, the First Presbyterian Church of Cola, but they probably went to the Episcopal Church, or the Lutheran Church, or the Methodist Church, or the Catholic Church. And my Jewish friends, they went to synagogue. That's just the way it was, right? That was the cultural time that we lived in. But my son, who's about to start confirmation here at Westside, I wonder how many of his peers even go to church anymore. So many of our young families, when I talk to them, they're like the only ones in their peer group that are going to church. This is a totally different time, and it's even more pronounced in the Northeast. Anne Lamott tells a pretty funny story about what happened to her. She's trying to raise her children at St. Andrew's Presbyterian Church out in California, and she had a teenager a number of years ago. And she said on one of her posts on Facebook, she said, I make him go to church, and he hates it. Well, you should have heard the response. People were accusing her of oppressing her child. Some even went so far as to say she was guilty of child abuse for making her teenager go to church. And her response was priceless. She said, well, wait a second. Left to their own devices, teenagers would opt out of many important things, including flossing their teeth, taking a shower, and doing their homework. We all have to learn to do uncomfortable things. This, she said, of church is weight training for life. Isn't that a beautiful image? Are you coming here to have the trainer do it for you or tell you what you got to do? Or are you building your muscle mass? Are you building your strength to face whatever the challenges are in your life? Are you here to grow and to get stronger? Sarah Hurwitz, who's been writing about kind of where we are and suggesting that we're at a crossroads, and not only in the church, but in the synagogues and in the different religious traditions. And she pointed out that many religious people, in her experience, continue to show up to places of worship, but they're kind of going through the motions. They're not really here to do much of anything. They don't really feel like what we talk about has much impact outside. And they just keep doing it. It's kind of habit. It's kind of rote. And she says, that ain't going to work. That's not sustainable. If that's the church, that needs to die. Right? She also says there's another group that they're often outside the church, although some of them are in, who have just rejected the kiddie version of Christianity. They don't know that there's actually an adult version. I reject the kiddie version of Christianity. There's something more mature. There's an adult version of Christianity. There always has been. And there's always been the church, the group of people who are asking big questions about the meaning and purpose of life. Asking, what does it mean to live an ethical life? What does it mean to respond to the challenges, the political challenges of our time? What does it mean to be part of a community? What does it mean to serve something bigger than yourself? She says if we are to survive as an institution, as a church, and begin to thrive again, that we have to invite people to dive beneath the superficial, shallow, kiddie versions of Christianity and touch upon the deeper, more mature, adult-like questions that our tradition has always grappled with. She writes, at our best, she argues, we are a form of protest against the self-absorption, materialism, triviality, and violence of modern life. That's who we are at our best. We are a form of protest against self-absorption, materialism, triviality, and violence. We are the voice in culture that is telling the world that we ought to be careful in this modern world because we are more imprisoned than we realize. And the church ought to be a place where we're handing out keys so people can unlock the prisons that they find themselves in and touch upon that which is meaningful and purposeful about this life. That's what it means to be deeply rooted in Christ. One of my mentors, he says it this way. He says the great sadness that we're all a part of, that is the norm today, that are the waters that we all swim in. The great sadness is that we are skimming over the surface of the depths of the life that we're living. That's the great sadness. It's touched your life. It's touched mine. Look around. It's everywhere. It is such a sad time on so many levels. And if we aren't inviting people into the depths of the life that they're actually living, if we're not inviting people to awaken to the precious, fragile, beautiful gift of being human, if we're not inviting people to recognize the great need for mercy and compassion and humility in our world, if we're not inviting people to touch upon real, abundant life, then we don't deserve to exist. And the beauty of this day, World Communion Sunday, is all across the world we stop talking and we invite people to a table to experience for themselves all the things we protest against, all the things we proclaim. And so you are invited to put on your scuba mask, stand on the edge of a great mystery. You're invited to hold this precious gift again, to gaze upon it with your eyes, and to be undone by the grace of God. So let's come. Let's taste. Let's see. Let's show up.